Hello again. We are finishing this incredible day. I can't imagine a better way to close our event, this BEHR Virtual Summit in its first edition. The next talk is gonna be wonderful for sure. There are a bunch of people to get there. They are Joanna Survana, Alex Killick, and Debbie Watt. They are the co-founders.
I can't hear. And
yeah.
You are.
We can hear you, Alex.
No. You can hear me perfect.
Yeah.
If you can hear what I'm saying, say.
Hello, Alex.
So it doesn't matter that I can't hear you. When it's my turn, I'll just say what I need to say, okay?
Sounds like a plan.
That's a thumbs up from me as well.
Thank you very much, my people, for being here. I'm so thrilled to have you here. Joanna, thank you very much for reunite these incredible HR pros. They are, for our audience, they are the co-founders of Beat the Ripple movement and many other things, of course, but they are going to talk about kindness. Please, your time, and we are delighted to have you here.
So I think everybody by now knows who we are because we've been here quite a while. So I'll introduce us again. Let's start again. My name is Joanna Survana and I'm the founder of the Be the Ripple movement. I'm joined here today by my lovely co-founders, Debbie Watt and Alex Killick. And we're going to have today an exploration of kindness, a delight for you for the end of this brilliant summit. So first, I'm going to discuss what is kindness, and I think we've covered some of that in the chat box. So we've got some Lucia says, kindness is the way that we share with others in a respectful, gentle and caring way. Sherry says that it's caring for others, treating others respectfully, absolutely. And that's all we've got so far on the kindness. Okay, brilliant. So we're going to look today at whether kindness is actually a fluffy nice to have or whether it's actually got a place in business and in organizations. And we're going to argue that it's vital in creating an ethical, a sustainable, and a responsible working world. So join us on our journey. So we've looked at what is kindness from the perspectives of what you were saying, and absolutely right. If we look at this kindness in leadership book, if you look at the cover there, you can see all of these kinds of words are dotted around there on this lovely cover. So you've got respect, compassion, engagement, care, empathy, fairness, all these fantastic behaviors and values that we all want to see in the workplace. And we've got here that kindness can be a quality and or it can be an act. And Antonio was talking about these behaviors earlier in his session. He was saying about the pro-social behaviors, about compassion, kindness, altruism. So all of these things are pretty much interlinked. But we're looking specifically at kindness today. So if we go on to the next slide, please, Francisco. So you didn't realise you'd have a job to do. You thought you could just relax at the end. Thank you very much, Francisco. So let's look at this. Does kindness belong in economies and in business? Or is it really just this fluffy, nice to have that's, it's very nice, but actually we don't really need it? So we could move on again, Francisco, please. Thank you. So I think that the terminology that surrounds businesses and economies on a global scale has somewhat dehumanized the organization and the way that we do things. So we've got their GDP. So for anybody, I'm sure you've all heard of it. So it's gross domestic product, and it's really looking at measuring the size of a nation's economy based on profits and money, and it doesn't actually reflect how the nation is doing with regards to well-being, with regards to care within that society. Now, I've also put there human resources. Now, when I first started working, it was known as the personnel department, and I'm sure lots of you can remember that as well. Then it changed to this swish new terminology, human resources. And my degree is actually in human resource management. So I chose to study that degree because I love people and I care deeply about people. And I'd worked as a manager in an organization for 2 years prior to undertaking my degree. And I thought, okay, so I need to do a business degree. I love people, it makes sense, human resources. And it's only recently that I've actually thought about it, the terminology that's used there. So the resources bit, it doesn't really sit that comfortably with me. Because if we think about resources, they're things that we use, usually, aren't they? Things that are perhaps expendable. Things such as natural resources, we'd have coal, and we burn the coal, and then what happens to the coal? It burns out. Does that sound familiar when it comes to organizations? So I think there's a correlation there with the terminology that we use. So if we could go to the, oh, you've done it already. So the terminology, there is actually another way. So there's GDP is looking at prioritizing profits, looking at the economy and profits and money instead of looking at well-being and welfare. The Bhutanese government are actually using something instead of GDP. They use something that they call GNH, and that's gross national happiness. Now, how lovely is that? And that's looking at holistically measuring how is that society actually doing. And you can see here that we've got 9 different domains dotted around the center. And lots of those areas are underpinned by, you've got it, kindness, of course. So I think that it's really a forward-thinking country that's looking at it in a different way. Now, we've put a link in the previous slide where it tells you about GDP, where it comes from, the history, and why it was deemed important during war times. But I propose that probably it would be beneficial for the UK, for the US, to be looking at the GNH. Let's look holistically. Let's actually show that we care about people. So if we could go to the, thank you. So the terminology has made me think a little bit while I've been putting these slides together. And I saw a concept a few days back where it said that what you incentivize, you become. And I thought that's really interesting. And I've got so many examples that I could give you about things within organizations being incentivized, and that drives behaviors and unfortunately often can drive in unkindness simply because of what's incentivized within that organization. So I think that the language that we use is so very important when we're talking about anything to do with human resources, to do with organizations, to do with culture. It has an impact on the culture of the organization and whether profits are prioritized both individually, at a team level, at an organizational level. And it made me think, were workplaces actually better before there was GDP, before there was human resource terminology? Were organizations actually better? And has the external environment actually driven behaviors within internal environments in organizations based on the terminology and the mindsets? Now, I don't know about that. That's just speculation, but it's something that I've been pondering. So I propose a shift in focus to a genuine concern for people, a genuine care and kindness for the people within our organizations. So I propose that from human resources, which kind of doesn't sit too well with me anymore, we look at humanity, or we look at calling it the human kindness function. So that really, I think, as I said, I studied for my degree in human resource management because I actually absolutely categorically cared deeply about other people. And I think that most of us who've gone into this line of work in HR, in L&D, we've gone into it for the same reason. And it seems that we're battling sometimes with the organizational rules, the way that things are incentivized, and we're not actually concentrating on the human part. And that's why we went into it. Now, I've got that lovely quote there from the Dalai Lama, which says that once you have a genuine sense of concern for others, there's no room for cheating, bullying, or exploitation. Instead, you can be honest, truthful, and transparent in your conduct. There is no room for unkindness. Now, I've put the link there as well, so you can access that article. And I want to just show you, I think we've missed a slide there, Fran. I think there should be another one there. Oh, maybe not. Okay, maybe it's changed order. All right, so embedding kindness with ripples. So what I'm proposing is that we embed kindness with ripples, and I've come up with this infographic for you. So as you know, if you drop something into an ocean, into a pond, into any piece of water, then ripples will spread. They'll spread out and they'll become bigger and bigger and bigger. And what I want to see in organizations is those ripples being kindness ripples, being values and behaviors that we really want to see in our organizations at all levels. So you can see I've put a hierarchical structural image behind this, but it could be any kind of structure of an organization that we're talking about. But embedding kindness into everything we do, for me, is absolutely vital. And I think we're talking about the policies, we're talking about the processes, and we're talking about the relationships that people have with each other. And it's not a one size fits all, it's taking an all-encompassing holistic view of the culture within the organization, yet individualizing our approach because people are different. No one person is the same. No one person's story is the same as somebody else's. So it's really important that we look at those. And you can see that I've got the acronym, cleverly the acronym RIPPLE. Sorry, I couldn't resist. But I've put things in there that I deem to be super important within organizations for embedding kindness. And that's respect and recognition, integrity and inclusivity, purpose and principles led, people-centric and psychological safety, listening and love, yes, love, ethics and empathy. And I think all of those things, if we embed those within an organization, then we're actually embedding kindness into everything we do. And that's going to then have an impact with kindness and care on our retention, absenteeism, motivation, productivity, and then wider positive benefits for society as a whole as well, because we go back to our families and whatever our day has been like in work, that's going to have an impact on our family, which is going to have ripples that spread out as well. So perhaps we've got our business case for kindness next. I'm hopeful, Fran. The next slide, please. Thank you. So as you can see here, when we put the humanity and the human back into our organizations and put kindness back, we can actually get a competitive advantage. So the US Chamber of Commerce Foundation cites various research studies. So there's lots of different things. If you go to that link at the bottom, then you'll see all of the different studies and the statistics. And unfortunately, this evening, we don't have enough time to go into all of them. But the key things that they've found are that if you put kindness into an organization and care, then it fosters trust. It assists in talent recruitment. It heightens employee engagement and commitment. It fuels learning and innovation. It promotes high quality service and brand loyalty, and it improves the bottom line. It improves business performance. Now, I know that we were talking about learning and innovation. One of the other speakers was talking about that and saying that if you're in a trusting and a kind environment and you've got psychological safety, then you really feel safe to try things out, to innovate, to give things a go. And if it fails, well, it doesn't matter. You tried. And people within your team and within the organization will accept that, okay, it didn't work, but you gave it an effort. So next slide, please, Fran. So what we're proposing today is that perhaps kindness isn't such a fluffy nice to have after all. Perhaps it's actually something that we all need to drive our organizations and to building competitive advantage and to look after our people, which is the reason that we've come into this kind of work in the first place. It has an impact on organizational culture, an impact on the bottom line, which ultimately has an impact on wider society too. So when we think about the ripples that I want to send out across all of these organizations, the ripples of kindness and care, ripples can also spread in the opposite direction. So they can spread negatively. So I think it's important that we think about how we're acting, our behaviors, that we're doing the right thing in organizations to make sure that they're positive ripples that are going out into the organization, into wider society. So I've got some figures on there, which isn't pretty reading. You've got 12.8 million working days were lost in the year 2018-2019 in the UK due to work-related stress, depression or anxiety. And that's from the HSE. Workplace bullying and harassment was found to be the biggest workplace issue after stress. And depression and anxiety cost the global workforce an estimated $1 trillion in lost productivity every year. And that's from the World Health Organization. Now, I think we can find so many more figures, but I think it's now time for us to get a cautionary tale from Debbie. Thank you very much for listening to me. Over to you, Debbie.
Hi, Jo. Thank you so much for the introduction to the Beam of the Ripple. My name is Debbie Watt. I'm a coaching psychologist. I run a small company called Bridgeborn Psychology. We work with employees in work, and we see the effect of kindness and unkindness every day in what we do. So I was very happy to join with Jo to form this. And so I was just giggling. I took I printed it, did a screenshot of the last one. Debbie, a cautionary tale. Thanks, Jo. I think I might keep that. Yeah. So yes, hi, Debbie with a cautionary tale. So I'm with a cautionary tale rather than being a cautionary tale. So I hope from listening to this that we like kindness. We can see the value of kindness. I think as practitioners, I'm sure the reason why we're here at this conference and we're listening to this particular talk is because we value kindness. We see ourselves as kind people. We work in kind workplaces. We're kind to our customers. We find it easy to be kind. But it's not about you. It's not about me. It's about how our actions are perceived by others. And so this is why I say, however, we don't always notice when we're being unkind. We don't notice unkindness. And if we don't know what to look out for, we can't recognize it and we can't do anything to help. If you could move to the next one, thank you. So, like I say, psychologists, we love our continuums. So kindness, unkindness, continuum. But I think it's more of a slope. So it's a slippery slope into unkindness. Now, I've got a quote there from the late great Terry Pratchett from Granny Weatherwax. Evil begins when we begin to treat people as things. And that kind of follows on from what you were saying, Joanne. So, it's that piece where we stop seeing people. So unkindness on the other side of the continuum grows when we recognize and respond to the individual needs of people. If you could change. So if you see, when we start to stop recognizing people, unkindness creeps in. So unkindness begins when we start recognizing the circumstances and needs of individuals. Now, the challenge for us in sort of human resources, learning and development, people looking after people, is we tend to have policies and procedures, and sometimes we start seeing people as a group of their employees. We might recognize diversity and other things, but we stop looking at the finer individual details of people's lives and what's going on. I think this is a lovely time to be thinking about it because we're getting glimpses into people's lives. So you're seeing, people's dogs, people's children. You're hearing other things going on in people's houses. So we're starting to see it. So hopefully this is the right time to be getting us to be a bit mindful. So yeah, I'm not saying people are evil, but we do need to start looking for unkindness. So I'm giving you I want to give you a case study. So in my work, in our work, we work with people going through transition. Often this is transition around return to work after a sickness absence. And so we get to hear a lot from the people about how they've experienced, what they've experienced in the workplace. So we see the unkindness. And so I could give you loads of examples of, towards the bottom end of our continuum, where people have been treated very poorly. We've got bullying, we've got unfair treatment. But I wanted to give you a case study where it's a situation where it's the small things. So it's the unkindnesses. So I'm giving you an idea of, I've got a case study, M. And so in the lead up to his sickness absence, there was issues around unkindness. So I'm going to go through that. That goes into when he's off work and how he's treated, and also trying to get back to work and treatment. So I've given you, I know this is the last one, and I know people might be getting a little bit tired. So I thought I'd give something to just keep us awake. So here's the everyday unkindness in action bingo. Now, I want you, I've put some shoes down the side, because we say empathy. You've got to walk a mile in someone else's shoes. So I'm giving you some shoes. So when I go through this case study, I'd like you to think about the players. There's M himself. So these are the people around it, the situation. So it's HR, it's his line manager, it's his colleagues. So these on the card are the sort of things you might be hearing from them, or they might be thinking or saying. So if we think of that as we go through. So, and I say now, there isn't a prize, but we may have one. If you could just go back, Fran. So the case study. So we've got M. He worked as a sort of senior analyst in a bank. He'd been there for about 4 years. He was a high performer. He was getting on well. But there were a number of things led to him experiencing a buildup of stress in the workplace. Some of these were related to work. There were several people off work, so his workload got higher. His son had some health complications, so there were some issues where his son was going back and forward to hospital. Though the workplace were good, they didn't reduce his workload, and because there were people off work, the workload was getting higher. There's slowly, and some of you may have experienced this, when the workload gets higher, you get more stressed, your productivity goes down, and there was a decline in his mental health. He was finding he was sleeping poorly. He was waking up early waking, worrying about work. So I think this is quite a familiar story for many. And so he went off. He went to his GP, got signed off from work. There were also some other things in the workplace with colleagues who thought they were funny, but they weren't funny. So just some badly timed comments about, his son and things like that. So there was some unkindness going on in there as well. So then we go on to, he's off work. And, does kindness come in? No, not really. He becomes someone else's problem. So initially, his line manager was keeping in touch, but then it went over to HR and occupational health. And so, he became someone else's problem. And so he was getting calls. He was off, I should say in total, he was off 12 months. He was getting calls, but they were very much going through the motion calls, which didn't feel very personal, didn't feel very like someone knew his situation. And it wasn't necessarily the same person every time. Then, he one of the things I hear from quite a few of our clients is that none of my colleagues got in touch. I thought they were my friends. I spent time with them every day. No texts, no one sent any. He later found out that that his colleagues were advised not to contact him because they make things worse. So they were worrying that they might make things worse. He was being, they were being told not to contact. So that was maybe unkind advice in there. And then while we started working with him, we were instructed by his income protection provider. So they wanted our support to help him get back to work. And so we did a lot of work with him on understanding and recognizing stress in the workplace, building his confidence and self-esteem, building resilience, doing some stuff around negotiation skills, and and how to get back into that workplace. And so there was unkindness coming in. Like he worked so hard with us, but as he was getting better, some unkindness came in from himself because he started to doubt himself, that they wouldn't want him back. And so there was a lot of worries there. And there was no reassurance coming from work. Sorry to be rushing through this, but I'm conscious of time. And so we got to the point where he was ready to go back to work. Brilliant, great. He was excited. I was excited working with him. And so we started to make the calls. And so we organized a off-site meeting at a local pub, local to him and local to the bank. And his line manager, I think it was a HR representative, kept cancelling. They kept finding reasons to cancel. So you can see, this person's M's not feeling respected. He's not important. They keep cancelling. And then we had the killer blow, which was his wife heard some gossip that someone at work was saying that they'd seen him driving a taxi and he was on holiday all the time. So he started to think that people were thinking he was a fake, that he was lying about his symptoms. And so, this was all going on. He wasn't getting communication from the workplace. So he started to think about, do I want to go back to that? He started to think, well, this toxic environment was the reason I went off sick. Do I really want to go back into the lion's den? So the end of our story is he didn't go back. We did a bit of work together, looking at his options, looking at what his skills and sort of what he could do. And he started his own business, and he's now doing very well. And so that's the end of the case study. So we can go on to the next bit now. Thanks, Fran. So I hope you saw some of this there. But actually, could you go on one slide from here, and I'll come back to the kindness audit. Oh, no, one slide forward, please. Yeah, so that's the thing. I want to just reiterate what Joanna said. There's costs with unkindness. So you can see the guy went off work because of unkindness was a contributing factor. His sickness absence was prolonged, with kindness being a contributing factor. There was already people off work, so he was another person off work. That puts extra sort of pressure on colleagues. Maybe they'll go off. So reduced employee productivity, both him and his colleagues. He left, so there's recruitment and training costs. They'd invested time in his training for 4 years. He's gone. You've got to get someone new. There's indirect costs. So that culture was pretty toxic, and it was getting worse. Employee well-being was going down. There was an impact on his family, and on his wider community when he wasn't sort of at work, when he was feeling unwell. He wasn't doing stuff in his community. And in terms of looking at potential employments, I remember him saying to me, there is no way on earth I would let my son work in that company. And, I think there was some impact on people shutting bank accounts and things like that. Again, revenue impacts. If you think that people are treating their colleagues like that, do you think they're good to your customers? If there's not a culture of kindness, what do you think that's going to happen? And again, you've got the reputational damage to the brand. If you can go back to the previous slide, I'm just going to sort of point you to this slide. you know, I hope you can see these are small acts of kindness. Some of these things, they're things that we could have done to people or we could be doing to people. And so it's just about recognizing the impact of what we do. And so the kindness audit is really around thinking about the things you do and why they might be perceived as unkind. Often it's just because you're busy. I noticed myself sending an email to our coordinator at the end of the day, and she's so conscientious. I know she's going to act on it, when I should have said to her, "You don't need to." She's got a young family, so you know, thinking about what you're doing. It's about things you don't do. One of my clients today said to me that she's taken responsibility to help with herself getting back to work, and so she's been sending emails to HR, and they didn't answer, and they didn't acknowledge that she'd even sent the email, and then she got an out of office reply, and then she, you know, again, things you don't do. Have a look at, you know, emails, things like that. There could be someone at the other end really worrying. Things you may not notice. So, you know, another client yesterday, she got called into a meeting. She's only been back at work a few weeks. And she was called into a meeting, and it was the first she'd heard that they were reorganizing her department. And so her manager was going to change, and how she worked was going to change. So the person who called her in the meeting should have understood who was in that meeting and how that potentially could have put her return to work back. Okay. If you could click to the next one. Yep. So yeah, if I'm going to give, I want to make sure Alex has got time for a story. Yeah, please have a look at those. These are the takeaways. But if you can only take one thing away, if you could just do the next one. Be kind and think about individuals. Think about the people you work with. So that's my takeaway. And I think it's over to you, Alex, if you're on.
Hello. Can you hear me? Thumbs up.
Yes, I can. We can hear you.
God, technical problems. My goodness me. I'm talking about a risky business, and I can't get the tech to work when I'm just about to go live. So I'm sorry, Joe, I didn't hear what you had to say. I got a bit of you, Debbie. Anyway, here goes. Are you a risk taker? You know, I didn't think that I was until the day I walked through the door to a new job in a completely new sector a number of years ago now. I'd like to share with you a story of one of my teams and why I believe kindness made the difference to our transformation. After a 3-hour journey in the snow and ice, and I should point out that I live in Scotland and we do and should expect snow and ice every year, but for some reason it always seems to cause chaos on the roads. Anyway, it took me 3 hours to get to my new place of work, and I went to meet my new team before Christmas. This was before my official starting date in the following January. I said hello and gave them all a piece of paper. On the piece of paper were 3 sections. Tell me your strengths, tell me what's going well, and tell me the one thing you think I need to fix. Jokingly but serious, I said, look, instead of giving me a Christmas card, it'd be really good if you could fill out this piece of paper and we can have a chat about it when I return in the new year, when I meet you all again. You could have heard a pin drop. I said cheerio and left. I knew that I'd taken a bit of a risk, but I thought, you know, nothing ventured, nothing gained. I'll let you know shortly whether that risk paid off. But let me give you a bit of a context, the flavour, the context the team was operating in. Day one, and I have to say the travel was a little bit easier, only an hour and a half this time. I received a vitriolic letter from the combined trade unions complaining bitterly about a recent promotion round, with HR getting in the neck from both staff and management for the process. That was a fire that needed to be put out within the first 24 hours. Week one, a damning audit report showing that only 17% of staff were participating in the performance and development or appraisal process. HR getting in the neck again for not policing this properly. Month one, the staff survey results land on my desk. The post-it note on the front said that they should be read while holding a large glass of malt whiskey and a revolver. Now, as this is a behavioural economics and HR conference, I'll throw in a couple of data points But rather than give you all the detail, let me just share with you the headlines. Only 35% of staff felt valued by the organisation. Only 49%, less than half, would recommend it as a place to work. And only 26%, and 19% if you adjust for don't knows, felt that senior leaders were running the place well. Overall, the engagement score based on our corporate compass of what I value, what I feel, what I say, and what I do was 59%. This is comparable to sector leaders at around 80%. My team's score was 58%, below the average. I was challenged by the executives to test whether that third point, the 26%, was about them or wider senior managers. So I undertook some focus groups. The feedback wasn't helpful for them or for me. It felt like I was arguing with scientists about whether mercury or alcohol was a better measure of heat. However, we eventually agreed it was hot and positive action was needed. Interestingly, though, the survey had been run just after a significant organisational change programme, where 100 staff had lost their jobs. This was out of a total of 1,500. There had also been things like pay restraint, pension reform, and the team operated in a quite difficult industrial relations context. Working with unions is difficult at the best of times. Working with unions in the west of Scotland, well, let's just say that challenge doesn't quite cover it. And if I told you that any one time, I think we had at least 2, if not 3, of the national negotiators working in my patch, it gives you some of the kind of context of the febrile environment that we were operating in. So I'm thinking, what the hell have I got myself into? But figured that the only way was up. I did 3 things. I listened, I learned, and I led. So first, listen. You remember that piece of paper that I asked people to complete? Well, I had one-to-one meetings with every single one of my 50 members of staff in the first few weeks. They moaned, they complained, they catharted. They also told me what was good, what was going well, and what their hopes for the future were. No one had bothered to ask them before. The one thing that came up repeatedly was that they wanted me to fix the stability of the leadership of the team. There had been a succession of different directors to me before I joined the organisation. I think there was something like 6 in the previous 6 years. So I knew if I made it past 6 months, I would get a long service medal. What was striking was how battle weary they were. All the pain and anger and unkindness from staff, managers and trade unions from what they'd been through. They were tired, they were scarred, still turning up but not turned on. It reminded me of that old adage, when things go well, managers take the credit, and when things go badly, HR gets the blame, and they were certainly getting a lot of blame. Secondly, I learned. I wanted to have a broader perspective about the team, not just the poor survey results and some of the anecdotal perceptions. So I commissioned some market research from my colleagues in marketing to understand from our clients what they felt was going well and not so well. This was a little painful but helpful in terms of what we heard. We used a net promoter score proxy, but essentially 60% of customers said that we were doing okay. Normally you might expect 90%. I thought, that's okay, we can work with that. But I was beginning to think that I'd taken on a Premier League football team halfway through the season, having to win all the remaining games just to stay up. With this insight, the staff survey results alongside the anecdotal perceptions, it gave me a very useful baseline. Thirdly, I led. By 6 months, we had developed the people strategy for the organisation, one that was shaped and owned by the team, and informed and developed in partnership with the wider organisation, giving us all a galvanising purpose. I resisted the usual urge that people have when they inherit a team to immediately restructure. Based on the strengths that they'd shared with me, I began to realign people towards the projects where their strengths were. It's what I call a velvet revolution, changing what people do and how they do it without the transactional selection and deselection processes that we in HR are famous for. Most were on board, but not everyone was happy, and that was absolutely fine. For a small number, we had some grown-up, dignified conversations about whether we could help them to move to different teams within the organisation, and if not, to alternative roles outside the organisation. Roll forward a couple of years to the next staff survey, and things were beginning to improve. 50% now felt valued, 75%, 3/4 would recommend us as a place to work. And even the senior leadership approval had almost doubled to 56%. Overall engagement had gone from 59% to 76%. My team had made much of this happen. We were now flying like a skein of geese rather than the headless chickens that we were before. And the scores? Engagement was now 85% from 58%, if you recall, one of the highest performing teams. And customer insight was at 90%. We'd actually managed to avoid relegation, almost pulling off the same feat that Leicester City had in their title-winning season. I apologise for those of you that don't follow Premier League football, but it helps to illustrate the point. Other KPIs were also moving in the right direction. The positive movement in engagement represented approximately a £12 million productivity proxy on an £80 million budget. Even our appraisal metric showed that 9 out of 10 of all staff were now doing them and seeing the value. So what's this got to do with kindness, I hear you ask? Well, everything, actually. While kindness wouldn't have been the vocabulary, listening is kind, learning is kind, leading well is kind. So maybe I took a few risks to turn around a team that had got used to and bruised by unkindness. But I think the bigger risk would have not been to do what I did. I don't know about you, but I've always found that you get more from people when you build trust, show support, loyalty, and even love, than you do from keeping people in the dark, scared to use their voice. And what do we now know about kindness? I'm sure Joe's told you, but I couldn't hear a word she said. We know positive human connections are the fuel for effective well-being and effective performance. Kindness is the engine. We know that people deep down are pretty decent. You don't need to take my word for it. Read the beautiful Rutger Bregman's Humankind, A Hopeful History. We know that unkindness costs a lot and that kindness costs nothing. We also know the global pandemic has been a catalyst for an eruption of kindness. Kindness has currency and its value is increasingly recognized. If we'd floated kindness on the world stock markets in March, I would have invested big. We also know that building back better is key and is tricky. I'm sure Joe and Debbie, well, I hope Joe and Debbie will support this. We believe in building and retaining a culture of kindness. It's key. Key for attraction and retention, key for engagement and well-being, key for performance and key for reputation. In closing, what I would say is that we need more kindness in our organizations to be more kind-led. Not because it feels good, but because it makes a difference to the bottom line. And if we keep rippling, we'll create a kinder, better world for now and the future. Kindness is a gift we can all afford to give. Listen, I'm not a paragon of virtue by any stretch as far as kindness goes, but I know that even a little kindness can go a long way. Imagine if we could give a lot. Thank you. If we're quick, we can get a drink before curfew. I think the gin and tonics are on, Francisco.
Thank you so much, Alex. And thank you, everybody, for sticking with us. I know we've run over a little bit today because we had technical issues, but I really appreciate you being here. So I know that you were stuck on the slide of kindness at the core of everything we do for quite some time. So I won't bore you with the details of that. But as that slide said, the Be the Ripple movement is actually founded on the guiding principles that you would have seen for quite some time there. So if you'd like to get in touch with us, to join our movement, to really start making a difference and opening up the discussion around spreading kindness in organisations, then our contact details were there on the slide. I think they've disappeared again, but just look for Be the Ripple 2020 on Twitter or Be the Ripple on LinkedIn and you'll find us. And I think it's time for questions now. Is that right, Francisco? In case anybody has any questions.
Wow, what a talk. Many things to think about it. I can guess that probably it's more difficult to implement this kindness or this culture of kindness than to talk about that, because you can see many people talking about kindness, agreeableness, but to get it is, I think, it's more complicated than we can thought, But some questions. It's clear that we need kindness in organizations, but can we measure kindness and all its ripples in organization, how we can do that?
So I think that I'll go first, if that's okay with the rest of you. And then if you've got anything to add, probably that's the best. So I think if you're looking, kindness itself is probably very difficult to measure. Are people actually being kind? But if you look at things that we were talking about earlier, such as retention rates, engagement surveys, you can look at the spot surveys that people get every week to see what the temperature is within the organization. Are people actually applying for roles in your organization? If not, then perhaps there's an issue there with kindness in your organization. And what about your teams? Are they cohesive? Are they working together? Do they seem to be productive? And if so, then you've probably got kindness within your organization. If not, then you probably need to really be thinking about working on that. Debbie and Alex, do you have anything to add there?
I think for me, definitely, I can see where there's not kindness, you get mental health difficulties. So you've got all your mental health indicators. And so if you're starting to see rises in sickness, absence, even if it's just occasional days, start to keep an eye on what's happening here, and actually start to just look what's happening with people a little bit more. So, it's the indicators. We haven't developed this model, this measure yet, have we, Joe? But soon. But at the moment, I think you've got to look at the indicators of discomfort within your employee, within the team.
To add, I mean, I think we need to change the currency, change the conversation, because at the moment we are using proxies, which is absolutely fine. But I think we now, and I think the pandemic has really brought it to the fore. Kindness is okay. Kindness is a good currency to talk about, and look at the impact it's had in terms of people's behavior. If you could start to get that pixie dust and spread it into organizations, you can see, even where you have proxies, what a positive impact it has. So whether you're a hard-nosed or a soft-nosed person, it doesn't matter. The evidence is there. We just need to find a different way, I think, of capturing what we're calling kindness and giving it some clarity, probably some academic rigor, which is beginning to take place. So that it doesn't become, I think, Joe, you might have talked about the kind of not fluffy stuff. This is about having a hard edge here in terms of making a bottom line impact.
No, I'm absolutely agree with that. Probably the first is to be kind and act, and then we can start to think in how to measure it. The second question is, I like it so much. What do you think is more important, recognizing kindness or recognizing unkindness? Because probably unkind acts are more powerful than kind acts. We know that negative emotions are more powerful or have a higher impact in people than positive. Probably, Debbie, better than me this.
Well,
what do you think about it?
That's the thing. I see so much the impact of unkindness, but I know for all us professionals working in this area, we come into this because we want to be kind. We want to help people. Like Joanna said, she went into HR because she wanted to help people. So it's almost about making that space for people to be able to be kind. It's easy to measure the unkindness or the effects of unkindness, but we don't want to be doing that all the time. We really do need to move the conversation to how you make the space for professionals to be kind the way they'd like to be. If that makes sense.
Perfect sense.
Absolutely. What I was thinking when you shared the slide with all those quotes, I don't have time, it's not my job. Well, I was, my gosh, I'm unkind.
Yes.
You know what?
We're all unkind. We're all unkind. But we don't have time to be kind.
And I wasn't aware of that, the thing here is we need to start to rethink our behavior or to observe our behavior first.
Yes.
In order to not to be unkind,
I think Francis,
go ahead.
A really interesting observation, because we make assumptions about what kind is, and we're seeing it all the time now. Be kind, be kind, be kind. actually, you've just raised some things where I think ordinarily you would say, well, actually, if I haven't got time for something, you wouldn't necessarily think that was being unkind. So Debbie's point about changing the conversation, I think, means being really clear in terms of definition, what we mean by kindness. Certainly in an organizational context, what does it mean? My preference, I have to say, and my experience has been, we could spend a lot of time trying to define and focus on unkindness. And I think HR has spent its life doing that. We spend our life fixing problems in the deficit zone. It would be great, I think, to shift the curve to the asset zone and focus on what we do well and be very clear what works well and do more of it. Because if you take away the oxygen from the toxic culture, that's where you're going to get, I think, more of the benefits or the biggest bang for your buck, in inverted commas. I don't think you'll eradicate it, but that's where you want to spend your energy, the limited energy that we have.
Yeah.
And I think, Francisco, back to your point about where you said you didn't realize you were being unkind and looking at yourself, I think that's the important thing for all of us to do, is look at our own behaviors first, and it starts with us. When I wrote the tall poppy piece that started all of this, I said in that I don't think any one of us can sit there with a halo and say, oh, I've never been unkind in the workplace, because I guarantee that we all have, whether because we were rushed intentionally, whether it's unintentional, but I guarantee that we all have. And I think it really does start with us. So it's a good point that you made there, Francisco.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, I think so. I was thinking about microaggressions or racism in the workplace or value or this abusive behavior or passive aggressive behavior that many times we are not aware that we are doing that. Other time, of course, yes, but we need to raise this awareness. You're spot on, really.
And it's a constant challenge, I think. So I don't think that any one of us can say that we've got it down to a T. We're kind continuously and we never go on to the other scale, because I think we're human beings. We can only try to do better today than we did yesterday and continue that kind of with that mindset.
I think one of the key is to accept that. Yeah. One of the key is to accept that we can be unkind sometimes and how to fix it,
Yeah. It's okay to say sorry.
Absolutely. Yeah. Another question is, how kindness is inborn? Can we teach? Can we train to be kind?
Yes. Yes, we can.
Absolutely, yes.
100%. Yeah. It's just like, you value it. I think Alex has told his story. But that's what a good leader should be like. Alex came to that through his whole experience, but we can train people going into leadership to be kinder, to think about people first.
Yeah, I think so. Alex, do you want to add something, or Joe?
Yeah, sorry. I was just going to say, I think that goes back to the point that I was talking about earlier about what you incentivize, you become as well. So instead of incentivizing individual kind of targets and the individual performing, and you get paid extra if you as an individual take on extra work, yet you're leaving your team behind, I think is very much about what you incentivize. So if you incentivize things that are kind and generate an embedding kindness throughout the organization, then I think very much that is going to train people, teach people, and people will learn how to develop as teams and as the wider organization, and it'll be beneficial for everybody.
The only other point I would make, and again, there's an ongoing debate around leaders born or can they be developed in inverted commas, and I think there's a bit of both, actually, at the end of the day. And Joe's other point is that you're always going to get a spectrum every day. So those engagement scores that I shared with you, that was a snapshot on a particular day. Had we done the survey, 2 weeks or 3 weeks later, you might have got a slightly different result. So, some caution, I think, in some of the data.
Yeah, I think persistent and to be constant to trying to modify our behavior is one of the keys. I was wondering if kindness could be related with another type of behaviors, like, I don't know, people who are more willing to cooperate or are willing, in organizations, or this kind of people. No, we know super cooperators. We know people who are more altruistic than others. I don't know if this could be related. I don't know, because I don't know the research, but I was wondering about that, because it could be pretty interesting, because we can show these role models to the rest of their organization in order to this is kind of.
There's emerging work on civility and incivility in the workplace, but it's actually, I think, quite a rich vein for research. So it's still relatively new, and some of it is still rooted probably in previous psychological research. So it's not, it's now gained its own focus, and it needs further work, so that when we talk about kindness, actually there's a common currency, a common understanding. But I think, as we're all saying, that there's a consciousness now about it and an acceptability. I mean, from my point of view, I would always want to talk about kindness in a positive context rather than abstract, and to be able to kind of connect it into real world. It's important that you don't just talk in abstract terms about kindness, as I said earlier, just about being kind, because ultimately, people need to kind of galvanize around what your purpose is in your organization, and kindness is actually a very important glue for doing so. There's been a lot of work recently on developing values in organizations. You could argue that kindness is one of the core values that organizations should want to have if they want to perform well. That's a view that I might take, but it competes against hundreds of other potential values at the end of the day. And it's how do you promote this and demonstrate that this is going to make an important difference. And I think that's a challenge in this as we go forward.
Yeah, really, yes.
And I think it's funny you should say about the values of an organisation, because I think it's the Scottish Government, I'm sure that part of their policy is about kindness and ensuring that kindness is embedded. And so it shows it's such an important thing. And rather than having these aspirational values there, let's have things that are living and breathing, that are actually working within organisations. And as Alex said, kindness can be quite subjective. So let's have a look at, what does being kind actually mean in practice? How can we display those behaviours within the organisation to improve productivity and all the things that we've talked about?
But equally, we know what unkindness looks like, and it can be described in various forms, and we know the negative impact it has in terms of organisational individual performance.
I'd like to be out of a job, please.
Don't say that.
I'd like another job.
No, well, another thing that came up when I was listening to you is, as a manager or as a HR leader or as a leader, when I have to give or I have to deliver a tough feedback, these tough conversations that usually we should face in organizations, how to be kind when we are doing that, because pretty difficult. Obviously, I guess we should be empathetic, we should be assertive with many things, but wow, difficult to be kind in a situation where we are all uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Can you be constructive?
Yeah, absolutely. And
if you can be constructive.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Joe.
Sorry. I've actually put together a Padlet some months ago, which is looking at that area, at giving feedback, because it's something that it can be really damaging to relationships if feedback isn't given in an appropriate manner, and it can really have an impact on an individual. So I've put a Padlet together, which is a curated group of resources. So I'm quite happy to share that with you later, Francisco, and you can share it with your network.
If you do.
But it is a very again, a skill that you can develop and something you need to work on, and think with kindness at the core, how are you delivering that feedback, even if it's feedback that somebody doesn't really want to hear.
Can I just build on what Joe said, because I think it's really important. Building those relationships is absolutely key. because if you have the trust and you have the mutual respect and support, it means that you can have those conversations. Whereas if you don't, then it's more difficult. So you're always going to find people that are very happy to, get their sharp tongue out and give somebody a good lashing. That's, there are people that are very good at doing that. It's actually really difficult, very, very difficult to give constructive feedback well. What I would say, just to finish the point, it's also not good not to give feedback. So it's not kind to say, well, look, I'm concerned about how that might impact the person, therefore I'm going to say nothing. Best just left not said, because that's not kind either. So doing it badly is bad, not doing it is bad, and doing it well is good. And actually that's difficult to get that balance, I have to say.
I think Alex, when he was telling his story, kind of downplayed the fact that he said they supported some people to move on to different parts of the organisation. That's that kind of feedback, isn't it? And I'm sure you did it with kindness to help them move on, to actually be happier and flourish in a different situation. Yeah,
they were not going to be happy with where we were going. So better to help them off the bus to something else, and to do it, it's what I call an elegant exit. It's to try and find a positive destination, in inverted commas, rather than, have that difficulty continue within the team, because that could become toxic potentially, and then you have to manage it differently with unkindness, maybe.
Well, my friends, we don't have more time. I really appreciate you. We really appreciate you. I can't thank you enough for being here. Such a wonderful conversation. We could be talking for hours about that, because it's a pretty hot topic. Thank you again. Hope you enjoyed the event and this talk.
It's been fantastic.
Thank you very much. And for our people, for our community, HR community on Twitter, on LinkedIn, people who follow us on YouTube, thank you very much for being there. Hope you enjoyed a lot. And probably the next year we are going to repeat this kind of event, because I think these conversations are much needed. Thank you very much, and see you on Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, on social media. Thank you very much.